Hey everybody, this is going to be video 1 for the Pineapple Mini Sew-Along. Let's go ahead and first look through our supplies that you got in the mail. You should have a big stack of white background squares, a stack of green squares, a stack of yellow squares, some binding, some batting, a piece of backing fabric, and a piece of the fusible interface. If you go on Amazon or go on Google, you can find this as Pellon Quilter's Grid or Pellon 820. It's a great fun cheater method to sew all your squares together, and I'll show you how to use that. So the first thing you're going to do is go through your green and yellow squares, pick out 20 of your yellow squares, 8 of your green squares, and set aside 8 total of your background squares. We're going to go ahead and do the layout. So this is going to be 5 rows of 4 to make the yellow part of our pineapple, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of our green ones. 2 of them are going to be doubled up, which is going to create these 2 half square triangles, and the rest we're going to match them up with a white square to make our regular half square triangles for here at the corner of each of our pieces. Go ahead and take your 8 white background squares, and on the back of them take a disappearing pen or a marker of your choice and draw a line from corner to corner on the back of those, and then match those up to the corner of each of the pineapple, these 2 leaves, and then for these 2, you're just going to pick the lighter of the 2 green fabrics, draw the line on there, and then put them face together. So go ahead and do that first and take them over to your sewing machine. You're going to sew on that diagonal line, sewing these 2 squares together. After you've got those squares sewn together, you can take a pair of scissors and you're going to cut about a 1/4 inch away from that line you just sewed. Then you're going to take that over to your ironing board and iron that flat, and these pieces become the corners for your pineapple or some of the leaves. So go ahead and get that done. After I've got all my half square triangles ironed out, I'm going to put them back in place and make sure that I like the layout. Take a couple of your extra white squares and put them up in the corners here, and you can start to see the shape of your pineapple. Once you get that done, stay tuned for the next step, and I'm going to show you how to iron these squares onto your fusible interface. Go ahead and get your iron hot and look at your fusible interface. Thanks a bunch, everybody. Hey there, this is going to be video 2 for the Pineapple Mini Quilt. In our last video, we went ahead and did the layout, and we made the 3 different sets of half square triangles, the green on green, the green on white, and the yellow on white. So go ahead and make sure you've got that done. Go ahead and, if you haven't done already, put a row and a column of white border all the way around your background squares and put that all the way around. Now let's go ahead and start ironing this onto our fusible interface. Go ahead and turn your iron on. The fusible interface has got 2 different sides, obviously. One side you can see the grids done, it's printed on this side, and it's a little bit more visible. On the other side you can feel it's the heat activated glue. Go ahead and put that down onto your ironing surface and stack a few of your rows up, going from left to right. Stack those up, pin them, clip them however you'd like, and put them over off to the side. Starting at the top of your fusible interface with the little bumpy edge facing up, go ahead and take the first row of your squares, and you're going to start them just off of the fusible interface. White on white, so it's hard to see, but you can see the contrast here. I'm making it so that way, instead of starting it on the grid like that, because when I put the iron on that, this part is going to touch the iron. So start it just off the grid by a little bit, and go ahead and put the whole row down, or 3 or 4 down, and give them a quick press with the iron. Doesn't need much. I like to put just the first 3 down and hit it with the iron. Don't worry about ironing it all the way to the edge, because then you risk touching the iron to your fusible interface and then it gets stuck to it. Iron it down about 2/3 of the way, and then when you do the next row, you'll get this part up here that had been left a little bit loose. As far as positioning goes, you want the pieces to butt up against each other, but you don't want them overlapping, and you don't want them to leave a big gap. Use the lines that the quilter's interfacing has, and work your way all the way across. This project's pretty small, so it's only 6 across. So put 3 down, then iron, 3 down, then iron. And when you get to your last one, take your scissors. There'll be some excess fusible interface on this side, and run your scissors all the way up. That way, when you hit it with the iron, the same thing's going to happen on this side. It's not going to touch the fusible interfacing. That way it won't stick to the iron. This fusible interfacing is meant for this kind of project. You can use a lighter weight interfacing, but one thing I like about this fusible interfacing is it's pretty tough. If I find that I put the wrong square there, or if it's a little bit cockeyed, I can pull it right up and reposition it without any issue. So go ahead and do your first row, then lay out the next few for the next row and give them a press. You can see as I'm ironing these 3 down, I'm also hitting that surface up here where they weren't ironed down, so they'll be nice and attached. Okay, and then the next 3. And you do that until you've gotten all the way down your rows. There's the rest of my leaves on here. And I've actually gone through down the bottom, so everything's on there. Again, this material, fusible interface, is pretty durable. If I wanted to switch up a couple blocks, I could easily pull those up. It's not going to rip the interfacing, and reposition my blocks. Make sure you don't have any huge gaps. 1/8 of an inch is about as big as you want, because keep in mind, when we start folding these layers over, we're going to lose 1/4 of an inch on each side. So if it did gap a little bit, or if points weren't lining up as well as you'd like, we're going to lose 1/4 inch on each side. Go ahead and iron everything down, and then just to make sure, we're going to flip it over and give it a hit with the iron on this side to make sure everything is pressed down really good. I like to hit it on this side, that way none of my half square triangles flip over as I'm ironing. Take your time doing this. This is a pretty small project, so it shouldn't take you too long. Okay, come back for the next video where I show you how to start sewing this. Hey everybody, this is video 3 for the pineapple mini sew along. Let's go ahead and start making this look like a quilt. Went ahead and ironed all of our pieces onto our fusible interfacing. Go ahead and use your scissors and trim away any excess, and actually trim all the way so that way your fabric is overlapping the fusible interface by, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch or so, and you'll see why we want to do that in a minute. What we're going to do is we're going to start at the top. We're going to fold this down, give it a crease with our fingers. It's going to feel a little bit bulky. Sometimes some of the fabric squares fold over on each other. Not a huge deal. Again, we don't want these overlapping, but we don't want it to have a big gap. Just nice and butted up against each other. We're going to fold that down and crease it. Give it a nice press with the iron. We want this as flat and as straight as we can because we're going to run a stitch along here. And it's going through quite a few layers. So make sure that you've got that nice and flat. And if you haven't changed your needle in a while, maybe now's the time to do it. So go ahead and take this over to your sewing machine. You're going to use your 1/4 inch foot and run a stitch from here all the way over. So keeping that fold butted up against your presser foot, you're going to go ahead and sew a line all the way down. When you're going over the parts that are going to have the half square triangles, you're going to feel that it's bulky, but just go slow and steady and keep it straight. So all the way off your project. Next time I'll use some contrasting thread so you can actually see it. From here, take a pair of scissors, and you're gonna cut this open. You're not gonna cut it off, but you are gonna cut it open. Small pair of scissors, and if they're nice and sharp, they go straight down like you were cutting wrapping paper, and you get that awesome feeling. Okay. So we've got that cut open. Now you take this over to your sewing machine and press this open. So over at your ironing, bring that over to your ironing surface, putting it face down. And what I like to do is work from left. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to work from right to left. I'm going to have a finger in front of the point of my iron and iron that seam all the way open. With this project, you want to iron the seams open as opposed to ironing them to the light side, because there's going to be a lot of bulk in this product, and we want to spread out that bulk of these seams as much as we can. After you've ironed that flat, flip it over and go to your next horizontal line. Again, these first few are going to be bulky because we've got these extra seams in here from our half square triangles. So get that to lay nice and flat. Get it hit with your iron. Go ahead and go over to your sewing machine, sew it, cut it open with a pair of scissors, and then bring it back over here to iron it open. Got that second row done. I'm going to bring that over here. Open this seam up and iron this all the way open. And continue all the way down. After you've got them all done, flip it over and give it a hit with some spray starch and iron it nice and super flat. When we flip this over to start doing the vertical lines here, the flatter we can get this to be at this stage, the easier these vertical lines are going to be. One thing to check for, make sure that you're pressing these seams all the way open so they're nice and flat. You can look here, I've got a little bit of extra fabric in there, so when I go to iron it, I'm going to make sure that I give it a little bit of a tug so it's nice and taut, so it lays nice and flat. If we lose, you know, 1/8 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch of fabric in there, and we do that consistently, we're going to lose a lot of fabric, and then this thing's going to get a little wonky as it goes. So make sure it lays nice and flat, hit it with some spray starch, and then we're going to rotate it and do the next step. Rotate. Rotate this first row, fold it all the way over. Again, press it with your fingers, and then run the iron along down it, making sure you don't move any of those seams that you've sewn flat. Okay, take that over to our sewing machine. Be careful as you're sewing down this line because you've got a lot more bulk now. You've got quite a few layers. So if your machine has some cruise control, bump that down a bit. Maybe not that slow, who are we kidding? Making sure you're keeping folded edge butted up against the gutter of your 1/4 inch foot. Same thing, take your scissors. You're going to be going through a few more layers this time, so take your time. I don't recommend sewing all the layers or all of the folds and then cutting them apart and then ironing them. I've never done it, but everybody who has tried it has reported to me that things get really wonky really easy. Let's take this over to the ironing board. Okay, over at my ironing surface, and just like when we had to sew this direction, we're going to iron it a little bit slower because we've got a lot of layers to go through this time. The flatter you can get this, the easier it's going to be, and the nicer it's going to lay when we sandwich and quilt this. I like to finger press it out first a bit, and then give it a good mash with the iron. Okay. Flip it over, fold our next row. So we're going to fold, iron, sew, cut, iron, and repeat until we've gone all the way across our project. And there's how mine turned out. All the vertical rows are done, all the horizontal rows are done. Go ahead, whack it with some spray starch, hit it with the iron. You really want it to lay as flat as you can, making sure that all these seams are pressed open so there's no fabric in between. Go ahead and sandwich this if you know how to. Otherwise, keep an eye out for the next video where I show you how to make a sandwich out of this. Thanks a bunch, everybody. Hey, everybody. This is going to be part 4 of the pineapple mini quilt sew along. Go ahead and get your completed quilt top. Make sure you've ironed it down nice and flat. Make sure that you've ironed all these seams open. The flatter you can get it, the better it's going to be able to lay when you sandwich it, and the better it's going to be able to quilt. So you've got your quilt top. You've got your piece of batting, and you should also have a piece of backing. I like to use spray base. This is a good German one that I have that I'm finishing up the bottle. Any spray glue will work for this. I like to, unless it's a spray glue meant for fabric, I like to let it dry overnight or so, just that way it doesn't gum up your machine. Okay, everything nice and flat. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my batting and lay it down nice and flat. And I'm going to put my quilt top on top of it. Making sure, now the piece I cut myself is not very generous, but I should have given you guys a piece that was big enough to give you, inch and a half, a couple inches around each side. So, got that laid down nice and flat. I'm going to fold this half over and get this a hit with the spray glue. And then working from the center out, smooth it out. That way if there's any wrinkles, they're going to go from here out versus spraying the entire thing and then having to work the wrinkles across the whole project. I'm going to take this half, a little hit of spray glue, working from the center out, smooth it down. Ooh, crack a window. Okay, flip it over and we're going to do the same kind of thing for the backing. Laying that down, make sure it's covering everything I want. Fold it halfway over, hit of spray glue, center out. This is the same technique and same steps I would do if I was spray gluing a larger project. There we go. I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and trim off the excess. Here we go, excess cut off. Let's talk about how we're going to quilt this. Let's look at the lines that your quilt already has. You already, obviously, because it's a grid quilt, it's got these nice lines going up and down. One really easy way you could quilt that is to line the edge of your presser foot up with one of these ditches and sew all the way down with your needle in the middle. That'll sew a line on this side. Then you flip it over, sew a line on this side. So you do 2 lines here, 2 lines there, 2 lines there, 2 lines there, 2 lines there. Rotate the project and do the same thing on this side. Makes a nice folksy little grid. Another easy way you could do is to draw some diagonal lines going through the corners of all the blocks and just sew directly on that line. Because it's just a wall piece, you don't actually have to do any quilting unless you want to. I try to do something different every time I do one of these. And I really like the heavy quilting that was done on this one with the diagonal lines. Really nice kind of honeycomb grid. I like how that turned out. So I wanted to do something like it, but something different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my disappearing pens and a ruler, and I'm going to draw a line going through the center of each block like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to quilt on either side of that line. But first, let me draw all these lines. Kind of hard to see, but there's the diagonal lines going that way. And there's how it looks with all the lines on there. Let's take this over to the sewing machine and quilt it. And here it is after quilting. I really like how much texture it added. And it's going to become even more pronounced after I give it a wash. Okay, so that's the end for this video. The next video, we're going to trim it out and put the binding on, and that part sucks and is hard, but we'll get through it together. Anyway, ooh, yes, I'm happy with how that turned out. Highly recommend quilting in this fashion. Okay, good luck everybody. See you for the next video.